This video will explain the entire Call of Duty Black Ops timeline, which includes all the games, from World at War, Cold War, and Declassified, to Black Ops 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, and all the mid-season content that occurred in some of those games. This is actually an updated version of a previous video I released last year. It's the same as that one, but now with 4 new sections, on Black Ops Declassified, the 6 games mid-season story, Black Ops 4, and the newly released Black Ops 7. So if you've watched this video before, feel free to skip to those new sections, but if you need a refresher or haven't watched the series yet, then feel free to start right here. As always, like the video if you enjoy and subscribe if you're new. Feel free to check out the other story content the channel has produced, for the informative, straight-to-the-point story videos like this, or the analyses and opinion-driven content as seen here. You can also donate to the channel's Patreon if you want to show some extra support. But with that out of the way, let's get started. Our story first begins on the battlefields of World War II. While tensions were high even before this and many smaller conflicts had already broken out, Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939 was when the war officially started, which brings us to Call of Duty World at War. World at War has 2 simultaneous campaigns, the United States and the Soviet Union. On the US side, we play as Private Miller, who battles against the forces of the Imperial Japanese Army. The campaign begins in 1942, a year after Japan had bombed Pearl Harbor, which forced the United States to join the war effort. Miller had been captured but is saved by Sergeant Roebuck and his squad. After their escape, the story jumps to 1944, with Miller and co. assaulting Peleliu Island. On this exact date in history, Operation Stalemate 2 had begun on the island. This operation was actually part of a larger operation currently in the works, but Stalemate was about capturing a Japanese-occupied airfield. The Major General at the time, William Rupertus, had predicted that the battle would be won in 4 days, but due to previous engagements with the Japanese forces, they prepared more defenses than before, so the fight actually lasted months. This connects quite well to the game, as the upcoming battles are quite the struggle, as they get harder and harder as you push more inland. The next 4 missions all happen in the span of 2 days, as Miller and his squad take the airfield, disable mortar teams, destroy artillery weapons, and defeat thousands of Japanese soldiers. Eventually, they are able to overtake the island, dealing a significant blow to the Japanese. This all comes to a head on May 29, 1945, when the United States attacked Shuri Castle, the Japanese headquarters. The battle won here was not the official end, but was one of the few pivotal moments of the war that led to Japan surrendering, bringing an end to this part of the campaign. While this is happening, over on the other side of the world, Private Dmitry Petrenko fights alongside his Soviet brothers, while they attempt to take the fight to Germany directly. While World at War might not seem related to Black Ops in any meaningful way, the connection lies here with our duo of Dmitry and Reznov, characters who will reappear in the next title. This is their origin story of sorts. The first mission is during the Battle of Stalingrad. Many Soviet soldiers seem to have died, with Reznov and Dmitry narrowly escaping with their lives. The two of them work together to not only escape the German-occupied zone, but also take down General Heinrich Amsel, the architect behind Stalingrad's misery. 3 years flash by as we're then transported to April of 1945. From here on, we begin the fall of Berlin. Reznov, Dmitry, and all the men beside them were the forces behind Berlin's eventual fall. It first begins with the German town of Silo, where Soviet forces are seen burning and destroying German homes, payback for what they did to their motherland. Eventually, Soviet forces would make their way into Germany and to the Reichstag, a building that held symbolic meaning to Germany. They felt that capturing this would hurt morale, and so just like they did in real life, the Soviets tore down the German flag and replaced it with their own. The heart of Germany was now under Soviet occupation. Both of these campaigns end around April to May of 1945. But it wouldn't be until September when the war was officially over. These battles that we play through were the turning points in history that led to the Allied forces defeating those of the Axis powers. And on September 2, 1945, World War II would officially be over. Following the defeat of the Axis powers, Reznov and Dmitry were sent on one last mission to clean out some last remaining Germans in the Arctic Circle. They were instructed by General Nikita Dragovich and Colonel Kravchenko to find a German scientist named Dr. Friedrich Steiner, who was willing to betray Germany to further the Soviet cause. Reznov has a pretty sticky history with the general, because during the Battle of Stalingrad he was promised reinforcements but they never came. He sees both these two as manipulators, people who will work with whoever as long as it gets them ahead. This partnership with Steiner is a great example. In 1943, Germany realized that the Allied forces could not be held back, so they started work on a bioweapon that could put an end to their advances. After its research was complete, they realized that they had created a weapon more powerful than they could have ever imagined. This chemical weapon was called Nova 6, a deadly gas that could melt a person's skin, killing them in less than a minute. Even a small amount of this gaseous compound could kill you. The plan was to launch them using large V-2 rockets and point them at the Allies' main headquarters, Washington, D.C., and Moscow. British bombers were able to stop the ship before they launched, however, which crippled their attack and left the ship stranded in the Arctic. Both Dragovich and Kravchenko were pleased to hear that the Nova 6 was still usable though, but they wanted to see the results in action, so they captured Reznov's crew and used them as test subjects. Reznov's cell was to be gassed next, but British forces were tipped off on the location of Nova 6 and boarded the ship just as the gas was about to be dispersed. This gave Reznov a chance to escape, who also managed to blow up the ship so that neither side could use this deadly weapon. We then fast forward to 1961 during the Bay of Pigs invasion. Characters Alex Mason, Frank Woods, and Joseph Bowman were sent to Cuba to take down Castro. The Bay of Pigs invasion was intended to establish a pro-American government within Cuba, rather than the communist-favored one under Castro. This, however, was a complete failure. The intended result of the invasion never came to fruition, and if anything strengthened Castro's hold over Cuba. It also led to many soldiers dying or being taken captive. It was a major blow, not just to the Kennedy administration, but to the United States as a whole. Black Ops 1 shows us that failure. Our trio works together with some local contacts to start a brief conflict at Castro's compound. This will allow the three of them to sneak in and deal with Castro while he's distracted. Mason and Woods will then breach his room and take down the Cuban leader. They attempt to escape, but realize that takeoff is impossible with the Cuban vehicles on the runway. So Mason stays behind and takes down the roadblock so the others can get home safely. As a result, Mason is kidnapped and taken by Cuban forces. Here is where he learns that the Castro they killed was a double. Castro knew they were coming thanks to his newfound partnership with Dragovich and Kravchenko. As a part of their relationship, the two Soviets took Alex Mason to Vorkuta, a labor camp within Soviet territory, which is where he would meet with his new ally Viktor Reznov, who was also captured at some point after he fled the Arctic. For over 2 years, Mason was tortured at this facility and underwent many different experiments, which we'll talk about soon. Reznov, however, had devised an 8-step plan to get them out of Vorkuta. Everything went well, but Reznov never made it. He sacrificed his freedom so that Mason could have his. After leaving Vorkuta, Mason was recruited by CIA handler Jason Hudson. He is then taken to the Pentagon to meet the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. We can see, however, that the effects of Vorkuta haven't left him. Mason felt something gnawing at him the whole time he was there, and there was a brief moment where he pulled a gun on the President. This isn't actually happening, it's just his mind making this up, but it's clear that something happened in Vorkuta that we don't know of yet. The reason Mason is here is because the President has a job for him. Dragovich is the greatest threat to the country's safety, so Mason was hard to take him out. And given his history with him, it's doubtful he would have said no. Thus beginning Operation Flashpoint. Mason along with Woods and Bowman were sent to infiltrate a Cosmodrome facility deep in USSR territory. This base has large missiles that could spell danger for the US if launched. Stationed here is also the Ascension Group, a group of German scientists the Soviets took after World War II. Helping them is a double agent, pretending to work for Ascension, Grigory Weaver. As the mission begins, however, Weaver's cover has been blown, who is then captured by Kravchenko. The group has to put on disguises to sneak into the base undetected, and with some finesse are able to rescue Weaver before he was killed. Afterward, they took down the rocket using some rather unconventional but still effective methods. With the base on high alert, they had to fight their way out. While there, they managed to find Dragovich's limo and blew it sky high. They couldn't find the body, so the kill wasn't confirmed, but there was a low chance he survived the explosion anyway. Following this, Mason was sent to Khe Sanh, Vietnam along with Woods and Hudson. By this time, Mason was a part of the Military Assistance Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group, or MACV-SOG. MACV-SOG was an actual group that operated in Vietnam just like the game. As the name implies, they conducted many different recon missions within Vietnam, including rescue missions and the capturing of enemy soldiers. As Woods explains, in 1964 the CIA gave up control of covert operations in Southeast Asia, and handed that over to the military, which is how MACV-SOG was born. The base here in Khe Sanh is not only a base for the military, but a launching point for other cross-border activity in Laos and Cambodia. Mid-conversation, however, the base is attacked. The Vietnamese were throwing everything at them and required every hand on deck. That's why despite being tasked with going to Hue City, they stayed behind to help the military defend the base here in Khe Sanh. It was a long and hard-fought battle, but in the end the US was able to hold them back. Having wasted so much time defending the base though, the Vietnamese were already moving in on Hue City. The building they were supposed to meet their contact in, a Russian defector who could provide leads on Dragovich, was bombed to hell, so there's a high chance that they didn't survive. Despite that, it's always better to have tried and lost than never to have tried at all, so Mason went anyway on the slight chance they were still there.
Mason.
Reznov, how'd you get out of Vorkuta? Never thought I'd see you alive.
Nor are you, my friend. I am here with a warning. Your government would do well to heed. Dragovich is planning an attack on the west.
Reznov was the Russian defector. He managed to make his way out of Vorkuta. Dragovich plans to attack the west with his Nova 6 gas, but according to Reznov, not even the Kremlin knows of his plans, so it seems like Dragovich is attacking alone. The dossier Mason was given contained info on the leaders of Nova 6. Dragovich, the leader of the project, Dr. Steiner, the creator of Nova 6, Kravchenko, who's more muscle than anything but was using Nova 6 to test its effects in Laos and Vietnam, and Dr. Clark, a defector who helped Dragovich stabilize the compounds of Nova 6 to make it more effective. Yes, somehow more effective than what we saw back in 1945. From here the group splits. Hudson and Weaver go to Kowloon City in Hong Kong to find Dr. Clark. They want to know what Dragovich's plan is, but he seems to have already sent his men after Dr. Clark to silence him. Weaver and Hudson attempt to stop the attack, but Dr. Clark is shot and killed during the escape. The only info they were able to get out of him was a base in the Ural Mountains, specifically Mount Yamantau. While this happens, Mason and Woods go back to Vietnam to investigate a potential Soviet presence amongst the Vietnamese army. This requires Mason to go into a rat tunnel alone as his partner Swift was killed near the entrance. Thankfully, Reznov is here again to assist should the need arise. According to the audio logs left behind in Kravchenko's compound, the current strain of Nova 6 is incredibly efficient. Within 30 seconds of inhaling the gas, the subject would experience sudden and severe pain, followed by a drop in blood pressure, leading to fever, nausea, and vomiting. 60 seconds in, and the subject's skin will start to peel off. Possible problems regarding the climate were nullified, as even during warm days, the gas is still potent enough to spread. Essentially, there is no stopping it once it started. After leaving the compound and getting picked up by Woods and Bowman, they head to Laos. Hudson claimed that the CIA downed a cargo plane carrying Nova 6, so the three were sent in to investigate. As they approached, they were ambushed by Vietnamese and Russian forces under the watchful eye of Dragovich and Kravchenko. Our trio was then taken and put into a Vietnamese prison to rot. From here, our story splits once more. Jason Hudson, having learned that Mason and his squad were MIA, decided to go on the hunt without him. He teamed up with Weaver and a few others to track down that lead in the Yamantau Mountains. They'd hoped to find Steiner, but they were too hopeful. He did, however, call them and provide them with some much sought-after answers. Steiner is willing to give up this info as, like Clark, he is a loose end and will likely be killed soon. He says that Dragovich has sleeper cells all across the US that plan to release the Nova 6 gas when they're given the order. This order will be a broadcast from a station that will relay a sequence of numbers. Those numbers are an encoded message that will give them the all-clear to detonate the Nova 6 containers. Steiner also tells them his location, Rebirth Island on the Aral Sea, which is where they head to next. Returning to Mason, him, Woods, and Bowman were then forced by the prison guards to play Russian roulette. Bowman refused and was killed for it. Woods and Mason, however, used their quick thinking to devise a plan. From here on, the two head to Kravchenko's compound using a hind they stole. As they approach, they rescue some POWs and find Reznov amongst them, who once again agrees to lend his assistance. They now, with the strength of a dozen soldiers, push to the back of the compound, but Kravchenko isn't going down without a fight. Kravchenko fights Mason and Woods in a 1-on-2. The duo seems to have the upper hand until Kravchenko pulls a pin on his grenade, hoping to take out everyone with him, but Woods jumps out the window and sacrifices his life. As Mason wakes up from the blast, he is greeted by Reznov. This compound is how Mason learns of Rebirth Island, so he heads there with Reznov, which causes a bit of a complication, as Mason and Reznov are here to kill Steiner, whereas Hudson is here to rescue him, as he's the only one who knows how to stop the broadcast. Unfortunately, Weaver and Hudson were too late. Mason and Reznov killed Steiner, cutting off their last lead and their only way to stop the broadcast. This brief conflict explains our mission interludes. Between each mission, Mason is being interrogated by someone regarding the broadcast station and what the numbers he keeps seeing lead to, which is when the truth is revealed. Weaver and Hudson were his interrogators the whole time. Mason was experimented on back in Vorkuta to be Dragovich's sleeper agent, and that Reznov was never with Mason. He died back in Vorkuta. All these moments at Reznov have been his imagination. Now that the real truth is revealed, Mason's mind is clear for the first time. This allows him to remember everything, including the location of the broadcast.
It's a ship. I saw it a long time ago. The Rusalka. Where? Cuba.
Now that they know of the ship's location, the US is throwing all they have to stop the broadcast. They then discover that the station is not the actual ship, but deep underneath it on the ocean floor. In the end, they come face to face with Dragovich, who Mason kills. He who was supposed to be his finest sleeper agent has now become the agent of his demise. With Dragovich stopped and the broadcast destroyed, the United States is saved. But peace will only last so long. Evil is a hydra. Destroy one head, and the other will take its place. The story then continues in Black Ops Declassified. Through Black Ops 2, we learn that despite seemingly dying from a grenade, Woods had lived. After he and Kravchenko jumped from that building in Black Ops 1, Kravchenko had come first, and took Woods to another prison camp in Da Nang, Vietnam, where he would stay for several years, before escaping in 1972. Back under the command of the US, both he and Mason would be tasked with accomplishing various objectives over the next few years. In 1975, Woods would be headed back to Vietnam to destroy some cipher machines left behind by the CIA, as well as rescue some CIA analysts who were taken by the KGB. A year later in 1976, Mason was tasked with escorting a Stasi defector across West Berlin, but as he approached the meeting site, the contact was killed. He managed to fend off the small army that had attacked him and take the defector's briefcase. In it was a microfiche that showed evidence of a KGB spy ring in West Berlin, which Mason went to and destroyed. Mason was supposed to keep one of the men alive, a Colonel Beloff, but he managed to find the info they needed, so there was no need to interrogate him for info they already had in their possession. Woods would then be sent back to Mount Yamantau a year later in 1977, as rumors had spread that the Nova 6 project was being restarted. The base was also chock full of ICBM missiles that had a Nova 6 prototype inside it. Woods had successfully managed to break into the base and destroy any attempts at reviving the bioweapon, along with blowing up the missiles. Although the helicopter he came in on was destroyed, leaving him as the only survivor of the crew. But he would later get word that one of the men had indeed survived. Tracking his location, though, Woods had found that he had been dead for a while, and was used as a test subject in their Nova 6 experiments. 2 years later, in 1979, Alex Mason was then tasked with retrieving one of the operatives that was deep in the KGB-supported Nicaraguan Armed Forces. Mason would also then finally travel to Afghanistan and retrieve a Mujahideen asset who was taken into custody by the KGB. He had succeeded effortlessly in both of these missions. This brings us to Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. The Cold War started a couple years after World War II, but it wouldn't be until 1991 when it would come to a close. While many countries were involved in the conflict, the two leaders of each side were the United States and the Soviet Union. It was called the Cold War because no large-scale conflicts like that of the World Wars were fought. Battles did occur, but they were proxy wars, where two countries would fight but were being supplied by the US and Soviets. So they weren't actually fighting each other, but they were assisting in battles that could give them a significant advantage. Cold War the game takes place in 1981, and this lines up right next to the Iranian hostage crisis, which is where our story begins. As the history books tell it, Iranian college students belonging to the Muslim student followers of the Imam line attacked the American embassy in Tehran. They were supporters of the Iranian Revolution, which sought to overthrow the Pahlavi dynasty within the country. One of the more well-known revolutionaries behind the movement was Ayatollah Khomeini, who had actually overthrown the current leader, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, back in 1979. After he was overthrown, the US granted him asylum and he was taken into the country for cancer treatment. Many of those against Mohammed had demanded that he be brought back to his country to face the crimes he committed against the Iranian people. The US refused, which is why the college students stormed the embassy. Flash forward to 1981, and they still had control of the hostages. Emerson Black, strategist with the CIA, called President Reagan, saying that they found two people linked to the hostage situation, Arash Kadivar and Qasim Javadi. President Reagan then sends operatives Alex Mason, Frank Woods, and new character Russell Adler to find them. They managed to track down Qasim to the capital of the Netherlands and storm his apartment to capture him. After a few beatings, Qasim tells the trio that his partner Arash is going to the Trabzon airfield in Turkey. Once they arrive, Mason goes to take the shot but misses, forcing the group to go loud. Using an RCXD, Mason is able to blow the tracks off the plane, causing it to explode and crash, almost catching themselves in the blast. Afterward, they take the time to question Arash. He explains that it was never about the hostages, and that his plan is already underway. This he's referring to is Perseus, a supposedly long-dead Soviet spy who is apparently alive and well. Oddly enough, there was a Perseus in real life during this time, although like the game, their identity was a mystery. Perseus was supposedly a spy who stole files on the Manhattan Project, which you'll recall was a development program into creating nuclear weapons. However, Perseus seems to have not actually existed. Researchers believe that this hypothetical being was just a creation of Soviet intelligence. Theories range from Perseus being a collective group of spies and not one person, or, hilariously, was created by the KGB so they could just get more funding. Assuming the former is true, there is a list of people that could be considered Perseus, as they were all Soviet spies who infiltrated the Manhattan Project. However, there has not been enough information to viably prove that Perseus existed, and that either of these people were Perseus themselves. This mystery becomes the goal of the game: find this Perseus and figure out what he plans to do to the US. President Reagan then puts together a team of operatives dedicated to the sole task of taking Perseus down. This includes Woods, Mason, Adler, and a few newcomers: Park, Lazar, Sims, and our protagonist, Bell. The team then meets at their safe house in West Berlin, exchanges greetings, and then gets moving on Perseus. They believe that they should first start by recounting the day they first met Perseus, which was back in Vietnam. Just like Mason and Woods, Adler, Sims, and Bell also served in Vietnam, but were stationed at a different base. The date for this mission was January 26, 1968. So this was days after Mason and Woods had defended Khe Sanh from the Vietnamese forces, and were on their way to meet with their Russian defector who would give them info on Dragovich. After a long fight, it's learned that Russian forces were indeed in Vietnam, and now they had a very important dossier of theirs. This memory exercise of theirs rewarded them greatly, as Bell remembered the encrypted names in the dossier and already started decoding it. Among the names was one that sparked Bell's interest, a man named Anton Volkov, a Russian arms dealer in East Berlin. He's not Perseus, but he might be allied with him, which is the closest lead they've got. To track Volkov, the team needs to find Franz Kraus, someone who is scheduled to meet with him tomorrow. They manage to track down his apartment nearby, prompting Bell to go inside and plant the tracker in his briefcase. Bell, however, is caught and apprehended by Kraus before he can leave. He then awakes in a small abandoned building, but thanks to the tracker, the rest of the team followed it right to Bell's location. They then work together to take down Volkov, and then it's learned that Perseus had smuggled a nuclear device into East Berlin. By cracking some encrypted files belonging to Volkov, they were also able to track down their next lead, which is at a Spetsnaz facility called the Zakarpatska Oblast, located deep within Ukraine. On mission is Bell and Woods, who infiltrate the facility only to run into a recreation of Anytown, USA. The Spetsnaz are preparing for a future invasion by running training courses designed to look like traditional American towns. Without much room, they have no choice but to blow their cover and initiate a live demonstration. As they make it through to the facility, they learn of Operation Greenlight. Back in 1958, President Dwight D. Eisenhower believed that the United States would not be able to act fast enough to respond to a Soviet invasion should they attempt to attack their European allies. So as a countermeasure, they placed nukes in every major European city that would detonate if Europe were to fall under Soviet control. These were standard nukes at the time, but in 1974 they were upgraded to only kill people, leaving the infrastructure of the buildings intact. Perseus managed to find this information himself. The nuke he smuggled into East Berlin was one of those nukes from Operation Greenlight. Perseus plans to take that nuke and reverse engineer its codes, so that he has access to every nuke involved in the operation, then detonate them all at once. Not only would this destroy most of Europe, those nukes are obviously American, so it would pin the blame on the United States, causing another major conflict. Their next step is to go back to Mount Yamantau, as an insider within the KGB confirms that they've set up nearby operations. Perseus wants the old mainframe Dragovich and Steiner used for Nova 6 at the facility, so Mason and Woods were sent to the Ural Mountains to handle it. The issue is that the mainframe is massive and requires a helicopter to lift it out of there. 4 days pass as they sift through the information and learn that Perseus was looking into the names of the sleeper cell agents Dragovich used for Nova 6. Unfortunately, they can't trace the names as Perseus erased them, and the only copy is in the Lubyanka building, aka the KGB headquarters. Before we move on to that, however, Cold War has 2 side quests that we could partake in. They require a bit of problem solving and evidence gathering, but they both end with Mason and Woods chasing down 2 key allies of Perseus, Vadim Rutnik and Robert Aldrich, both of whom are taken care of. Returning to the story, our team can't get into the building normally, so they hire the help of their KGB mole Belikov. Belikov then meets with some high-ranking members, including not only Kravchenko, but Imran Zakayev. Zakayev is the antagonist of COD 4 Modern Warfare. However, in 2019, 2022, and 2023, Activision rebooted the series under the same names. This Zakayev in Cold War is not the same one in COD 4. Regardless, Belikov's role in this plan is to get them access to the bunker, but to do that they need a bunker key. Worse, they know that a mole exists within the KGB, so they've restricted bunker access. The objective from here is to get a bunker key, but you're free to go about that however you wish. I chose to poison General Charkov, who also let slip that he knows that Belikov is the mole. Thankfully, he won't be around to tell anyone. With the bunker key in hand, Belikov can give Adler and Bell a direct route to the basement where the info is stored. Unfortunately, they will have to go loud once they're down there, which will naturally result in heavy resistance. Among the list of sleeper agent names, the one they found was Theodore Hastings, a nuclear engineer in Salt Lake City. The team thinks that Hastings will be the one to activate the nukes after receiving the codes, but that couldn't be further from the truth. This is when the team learns of what we talked about before, where Perseus plans to detonate all the nukes. Hastings and his team were the ones hired to reverse engineer the nuclear codes. Perseus never had the intention of using the sleeper agent again, because he executed the team right when he got what he needed. With the info in hand, they can now extract before things get too hot, but amid extraction, Bell, Lazar, and Park are downed. Bell is able to only rescue one person, while the other will be left behind and killed. The ramifications of this choice are something we will have to discuss later though. Severely wounded, Bell is escorted to the safe house. Adler injects Bell with a drug that you think is to heal him, but that would be incorrect. Just like Black Ops 1, Bell too has been brainwashed, and everyone on the team knew about it.
We gave you a second chance when you were shit out of luck. Now, we just want some assistance in return.
Bell, you were one of Perseus's agents. His associate, Arash Kardavar, turned on you at the airstrip in Turkey. Left you for dead.
But I have other plans for you. Perseus thinks too highly of you. I don't want the competition.
We were there. We found you after everything went down. The CIA reinvented you, Bell. We needed to give you a new identity to replace the old. Sims and I both wanted you to be CIA. You didn't resist it as much as we thought you might. And we were able to utilize your language and cryptography skills as an added bonus. The bigger challenge was your memory.
The CIA's MK-Ultra program used Adler's missions in Vietnam as a template. We needed you to have that shared experience, that lifelong bond, to establish trust.
Bell was a Russian soldier working for Perseus the whole time. Now that we learn of our true self, we have a choice to make. We can either lie or tell the truth about where the nukes are being launched from. Should you choose to lie, Bell takes the team to Duga, Ukraine, and with Perseus ambushes and kills them all. When no opposition left, Perseus can activate Operation Greenlight, making the US take the blame for the attacks on Europe. This isn't canon, but it's a nice look at the alternative timeline where they did fail. What really happened is Bell told the truth, and the team confronted Perseus at Solovetsky. They stop Perseus's plans, but Perseus himself evades capture again. Still, the world was saved again, and that's all that matters. President Reagan also learned that Moscow wasn't aware of Perseus's plan, so it seems like Perseus was also acting alone the whole time. As the game ends, Adler meets with Bell and thanks him for his service. It was a hard choice he had to make, having to betray his countrymen and side with his enemy even after everything that happened. But Adler will have to make an even harder choice, pulling a gun on Bell before the game cuts to black. Adler appears in the next game, so he survives this encounter, but whether Bell did or not is still up for debate. A year later, a covert raid between the Division and the Nicaraguan Contras resulted in a power shift in the Central American drug trade. The CIA had caught wind of a meeting between the leaders of the Nicaraguan drug traders and devised a plan to take them out and transfer the drugs into more friendlier hands. This led to a raid on the drug factory, leading to the death of its leader, Jose Menendez. His son Raul Menendez had seen his death and then ran away. Despite being the drug lord's son, they called off the hit, as Raul was not the target. A couple years later in 1984, the crew from Cold War then got word of a new threat named Stitch. He served under General Kravchenko at Rebirth Island back in Black Ops 1. He handled the production of Nova 6 at the time until Weaver and Hudson found their location. Stitch was then captured and taken by Adler, who stabbed his eye out as revenge for Weaver. This interrogation and his subsequent sentencing in the Gulag gave him new perspective. He then baited Adler into meeting him at the Pine Mall, where Adler was captured and tortured just like him. His team followed a few leads placed by Perseus with the intent of wasting their time, which they happily fell right into. Naga was used as a distraction to keep them occupied. The CIA then learned that Adler had been moved to Verdansk. Meanwhile, operators Wraith and Knight would travel to Mount Yamantau to retrieve the data of the numbers program that Mason went through in Vorkuta. They would also blow up Mount Yamantau with a nuke. Stitch plans to not only pin the explosion on the US so that the Soviets have a reason to go to war with them, but he also wants the numbers data so he could affect entire nations of people instead of just one. The strike team put in place to rescue Adler is fortunately able to find him, but he's already been brainwashed by Stitch. He then moves forward with his plan and calls up a contact from South Africa named Jackal, who orders those at the jump station to ground the American satellites as they were interfering with the broadcast. Their newest recruit, Kitsune, is then tasked with picking up a package and heading to Germany to upload the Dragovich program, which activates the number sequence, brainwashing Woods' unit. Hudson questions how they were able to get the data, and how the data recording on the grounded satellite was busted, despite the autopsy coming back that it wasn't, leading Hudson and Woods to believe that Adler was brainwashed during his prior encounter with Perseus and was inadvertently working for the enemy. Like with Mason 20 years ago, Adler gets to sit in the hot seat while he's questioned on what his involvement is with Perseus. According to what happened, Adler went rogue and went to Verdansk to blow up Stitch's operation by placing numerous charges below the city. Eventually, they managed to track down Stitch's location to a gravesite outside Verdansk. Adler demands the location of Perseus before Stitch motions to the grave. The Perseus he wanted died a year ago from cancer, but Perseus is not just one man. He was not the first, nor is he the last. Perseus is a collective, and Stitch is a part of it. The reason he's so forthcoming about this information is because his role in the story is finished. He has played his part, the broadcast was complete, and now the rest is out of his hands. Adler then wastes no time pointing a gun at Stitch, killing him for good. 2 years later, in 1986, we then find Mason working with Jonas Savimbi to recapture Woods, who had been taken by a Nicaraguan gunrunner. This man was none other than Raul Menendez, who the CIA let go back in '82. He wanted to know what the agency had on him, so he captured Woods to see if he'd spill. To get Woods, Mason is going to need some help. Savimbi, leader of UNITA, is at a war with the MPLA. This conflict was known as the Angolan Civil War, a real war, one that the real Savimbi did take part in. This whole conflict was caught up in a proxy war, as the MPLA was supported by the Soviet Union, UNITA was supported by the US, and a third group called the FNLA was supported by China. This explains why Mason is allied with Savimbi during this conflict. The two of them strike a deal. Mason helps Savimbi push the MPLA back, and he gives him info on Woods. Once they do, they track down the boat he's on and find him just barely alive. He had been put in a container for weeks and likely would have died not too long after had we not found him. While trying to radio for extraction, Mason sneaks into a base and comes face to face with Raul Menendez. Without evac, they have to run back to the shoreline while being chased by Menendez's cartel. Thankfully, Savimbi arrives and helps them fight the cartel. Moving forward to September of the same year, Mason and Woods are in Afghanistan to help the Mujahideen and his forces fight back against the Soviets. In return, the Mujahideen will provide him with the location of Menendez. While fighting, they manage to come across Kravchenko, who is then interrogated for information before Woods kills him. Kravchenko is siding with Menendez because the Soviet Union is dying, and Menendez wants to watch the world burn. So he started supplying places like Cuba and Angola with guns to start wars. While the info is great, unfortunately the Mujahideen were working with Menendez and betrayed Hudson, Mason, and Woods the moment they finished their interrogation. They were then dumped out into the desert left to suffer and die until Reznov came by to rescue them. Obviously this isn't Reznov, it's just some guy, someone we still don't know the identity of to this day. Next, the team headed to Nicaragua, as Menendez is taking refuge there. They plan to work with Manuel Noriega, de facto president of Panama at the time, to capture Menendez. The plan will go smoothly until Noriega betrays them and sets Menendez free. See, Menendez hates the US. During the Cold War, he witnessed the Contras kill many of his people. The Contras were a revolutionary group who were funded by the United States. Then in 1972, a massive earthquake hit the country, killing thousands and injuring even more. This event is pretty famous because the government at the time was accused of hoarding foreign aid while refusing to give leftovers to those in need. This caused a major anti-government sentiment to occur among the citizens, eventually leading to the Nicaraguan Revolution. A year later, his sister Josefina was injured in a fire. Then he and his father started selling drugs for money and became one of the most well-known families in the country. They were essentially on top of the world because of this, until the CIA took notice and killed Menendez's father. So all he has left is his sister, but that would change today. Hudson, Woods, and Mason planned to raid his compound, but Noriega had let him go free. Fearing the worst, that his sister might be in danger, Menendez knocks out Noriega and races back to the compound. He manages to clear through all the guards alone without issue. Rage is in hell of an anesthetic, as they say. While this is happening, our trio is making their way deeper into the compound until they come face to face with Menendez.
Woods, no!
The grenade had missed and killed Josefina. This was the final straw for Menendez. He'd always hated the United States for what they did to him, but enough was enough. From here on, it's personal. The start of this newfound hatred was faking his death. The end of this mission shows Menendez in a body bag, but he is anything but dead. For years he would be in Panama plotting against the US. Word got out that Menendez was alive and working with Noriega, so they went back to Panama for a snatch and grab operation, but Menendez planned ahead. He worked with a mole inside the CIA to kidnap a young David Mason, Alex Mason's son, along with Hudson. Hudson was told to relay orders to Mason and Woods, who were on point for this mission, to get them to where Menendez wanted. They were supposed to get Noriega, but plans changed. They apparently found Menendez too. Mason and Woods then split up at this point, with Woods being tasked to fire the killing shot on Menendez. This should have been the end of the gunrunner's rule, but Woods was tricked.
Mason! Fool. You bastard! Menendez!
After being captured, Woods was brought to a small abandoned factory and was forced to watch as his partner Hudson was also killed in front of him. He and David were the only survivors of this attack, intentionally so, as Menendez wanted them to understand true pain, the type of pain he felt when Josefina died. This for the time would be the end of Menendez, as his future schemes wouldn't take effect until 2025. In between then, an entirely different conflict occurs. Black Ops 6 starts in 1991. The Cold War is almost over, many of the country's nuclear armaments have been dismantled, and the Gulf War has begun. We begin with a new set of characters, Troy Marshall, Jane Harrow, and of course, Frank Woods. They are talking with CIA Deputy Director Daniel Livingston about a mission that seems to have gone sideways. The mission involved Harrow, Marshall, and new protagonist Case. They're here to find a man named Alawi, who is near the Iraq-Kuwait border. Prior conflicts led to lots of tension, but in 1990, Iraq wanted to cancel the large debt they owed to Kuwait, and believed that Kuwait was their rightful land. So their leader, Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait and kicked off the war. This led to numerous sanctions being placed on Iraq, and various countries, including the US, to assemble its forces to push back Iraq's forces. Alawi is a minister of defense and a close friend of Saddam, which is why they were sent in to take him. As you'd expect, Alawi is a small fish in a much larger pond. After finding him, a military group called Pantheon arrives and attempts to take Alawi for themselves. As the group leaves, having escaped from Pantheon, Adler arrives and shoots Alawi dead before surrendering. Supposedly, Adler was labeled a CIA traitor and has been on the run for the past 10 months. One of the themes of Black Ops 6, though, is that the truth lies. Hudson had apparently discovered that a military group had possibly infiltrated the CIA. This was weeks before he would die in Panama. After his death, Adler began looking into Pantheon, and claimed that they not only had a bioweapon, but that they were also receiving orders from within the CIA. Once Pantheon took notice, they framed him for the attacks on Panama. They claimed that he was the mole that got Mason and Hudson killed. They also forged documents that show Raul Menendez had transferred funds into Adler's bank account. The CIA at this time had ordered him to return for a meeting, which he knew would be the end of him, so he never took that flight and went off the grid for 10 months. Now he's returned, because he claims that Alawi can't end up in the hands of the Pantheon or the CIA, so he had to be killed. He is then taken by our new team and brought back to the CIA for questioning. The team is also being questioned for their abysmal failure. They attempt to explain that this Pantheon was behind the attack, but Livingston isn't buying it, so he suspends the team. Woods and Marshall are naturally not going to stop the hunt for Pantheon, though, just because the CIA told them, so they plan to operate off the grid like Adler. This leads them to an old abandoned KGB safe house that was used during the days of Black Ops 1. This was a safe house Adler had set up for his missions, and Adler used this to investigate Pantheon. To start their plan, they need to increase their manpower. Not only do they need Adler, but he also recommended a few contacts that could be helpful to the cause, including Savati Dumas and Felix Newman. Savati was an assassin for a group called the Guild that operated in Avalon. She used to be a part of them, but was supposedly exiled from them some time ago. Savati herself explains that she was involved with another member of the Guild named Pascal. He convinced her that she wasn't a killer, which led to her wanting a different life away from the shooting and assassinations. It was learned, however, that Pascal was an operative from a rival family sent to break up the Guild's forces on purpose, so Savati was chosen to take him out. Except, that was a lie. Pascal never worked for another organization. The Guild had lied to her. This betrayal of the people she once called family for her whole life led her going freelance, vowing to take down the Guild one step at a time. And Felix Newman is a deadly ex-Stasi engineer. His hacking and technical skills are second to none, so he'll be a valuable asset to the team. Marshall is going to get Felix while Case handles Savati. As we approach, she asks us to assist her with a job. We help her, she joins the cause. The job is simple. There's a target she wants killed, a guy named Yannick, a broker for the Guild. Finding Yannick will not only prove that the Guild is working for Pantheon, but his death will draw out the real target Savati wants. Getting up to the church bell tower, Case learns that the Guild is indeed working with Pantheon. As soon as the shots are fired, he works with Savati, who gives him a dossier, describing their next target, Johannes Asadi. His description describes him as Big Boss. Hopefully not that big boss, or we might be in trouble here. For Savati to get close to Asadi, Case has to play the fall guy, and intentionally get caught so that she can escort him to the Guild leader's secret room. The two are able to break in, but miss Asadi only to blow up his car as he attempts to escape. And with that, Savati agrees to join the team. As Case and Savati return, Marshall also returns with Felix. This means that all they need is Adler, and the team will be ready to take down Pantheon. Problem: Adler is deep underground in a CIA black site under Capitol Station, right in the heart of Washington, D.C. Worse, it requires a retinal scan to even enter. Fortunately, Senator Jack McKenna will be here attending a conference with presidential candidate Bill Clinton, so as long as we can get him alone, we should be able to forge a retinal scan. To get inside, Case is going to pose as a journalist for the Washington Telegraph. He'll have to be careful though, as Harrow is also here, who lets him know the CIA is out looking for them and may even show up. From here we have a few options as to how to proceed. I chose to find a note hidden in the coat pocket, which led to Case meeting with an ex-Navy SEAL who wanted to meet with Senator McKenna. This led Case right into a trap, as McKenna knew something was wrong. Case is able to escape though and take the photo, giving them access to the black site. However, Pantheon is already on the move and plans to kill Adler once they're done with him. The team manages to fend off Pantheon though and escort Adler out of the black site, using some quick thinking and irregular methods. Back at the safe house, Adler explains that Pantheon had an exchange with Saddam Hussein. They get cover in facilities. Saddam gets access to the experimental bioweapon called the Cradle. Supposedly this cradle is located in Iraq in a remote palace owned by Saddam, so we'll have to infiltrate it. Working along with us are some members of the coalition that was set up to stop Iraq from advancing on Kuwait. This even includes Helen Park, who lived the events of Cold War, meaning Lazar did not. With her help, the team is able to infiltrate the palace and finds a leftover experiment using the cradle. The project was headed by Matvey Gusev, a Soviet scientist within their biological weapons program. He seems to have just been the one to work on the bioweapon, however, as the device itself came from an American research facility, called Advanced Technologies and Applications. It's hidden under a front company in Kentucky called Cosper Solutions. As the team approaches, they notice a gas leak of some kind has occurred. The people working here were experimenting on human test subjects, but something occurred and the place was quarantined. This is where Case comes in. He was one of those test subjects. He was the one and only volunteer for the Cradle project, and the results they were getting were exceeding expectations. Case was becoming a perfect super soldier. A side effect of the test is the voice in his head that sounds exactly like Harrow. Whether through his own mind or the voice in his head though, he raged through the facility and destroyed it. He was the reason the gas was dispersed and why the facility had to be abandoned. This would also explain why he wasn't affected by the Cradle's gas. He was already infected by it years ago, so he has a sort of natural resistance to it. Although he is still seeing visions of the staff who are either zombies or mannequins. After the facility was destroyed, Livingston shut down the facility and dissolved the Pantheon branch of the CIA, which is likely where our new group got the name from. They then repurposed the test into a bioweapon, which is how we got the Cradle. Case was then taken in for rehabilitation, but it's clear that the rehab didn't fully cure him. The aforementioned zombies are a pretty good indicator, but he's also unable to talk about the program. No matter how much you try to bring it up in conversation, you can't talk about the tests. It seems like it was a failsafe implanted in Case's head should he try to speak out about what happened. Going back here though has caused some unpleasant memories to resurface, and the constant spread of the Cradle isn't helping either, which is why when Savati and Marshall hold him down to calm him, he believes they're zombies out to kill him. Returning to the mission, our group finds the containers that held the Cradle, but each one is empty. At the very least though, it does confirm that they were indeed using the Cradle here. As they return back to the safe house, Felix manages to crack open the encrypted floppy disk they got when investigating Saddam's palace, and it shows some pretty incriminating evidence.
It's a biological weapon. You know this already.
Keep watching.
Is it faster this time?
Faster, yes. And more aggressive, as requested.
Wonderful.
Harrow is working with Pantheon. Things have certainly changed now, but the team is without a lead. However, Felix was able to isolate some audio within the recording they watched back and heard the words B-24 and Fucina. This points to a safety deposit box deep in a casino back in Avalon. So it's time to suit up, plan a heist, and play some poker. This requires everyone to contribute. Woods will be on comms, communicating and orchestrating things behind the scenes. Case will go underground and plant bugs to give Woods access to the cameras. Then purposely get captured so he can be taken to a secret room not too far from the deposit box. Marshall will play some poker to win a bar card, giving him access to the high roller section of the casino. This will let him screw with the machines, causing them all to jackpot. This is when Felix will disguise himself as a mechanic, who will gain access to the server room to copy the keycard to give them armory and elevator access. And Savati will provide support whenever she's needed, like causing a commotion so Marshall can slip in a card he pocketed before the hand. Then Felix, Marshall, and Savati will go downstairs and break open the vault. While the guards are distracted, Case with his superhuman strength can just overpower the last guard, giving him a chance to steal the items in the safety deposit box without hassle. After a daring escape, the team celebrates with some beers before getting a call from Adler. He managed to find Gusev's location. He's at a Kuwait airport, which is quite the predicament, as thanks to the Gulf War, that place is a war zone. Fortunately, Adler with his endless phone book of names has a contact who will help. That person is Sims, who after the hunt for Perseus went back to the army and attained the rank of captain. After a tough firefight, Adler, Sims, and Case ground the plane that Gusev was taking off in and threatened him enough to get some answers. The cradle is in Vorkuta. The former prison labor camp has now been turned into a base for Pantheon's bioweapon. To get inside, Savati's going to need to go undercover and disable their defenses. Along the way, Savati finds Harrow within the base. She plans on leaving soon so that the Soviets and the US don't know that they're here. The raid on the base by our team, though, is going to throw a wrench in that plan, as they make their way through the facility and capture Harrow along the way. With her in hand, they're going to go through some intense questioning, so that they can learn what she plans to do with the cradle and why. To do that, Adler's got some leftover drugs, likely from his time with Bell, so they're going to MK Ultra her into giving it up. You know, this is like the third time this series has done this, by the way. We end up in this dream sequence where we go through Harrow's memories as she tries to piece together her past, whilst convincing her to give up the truth. All while Pantheon is at our doorstep trying to break her out. According to her, a while back her mom and dad were killed by a targeted attack by the CIA. The details are still a bit hazy, but Emerson Black, who you remember from Cold War, called the hit. The game shows us that both Pantheon and Adler were the ones that killed her parents, but it's clear her memory is a bit fragmented as she was only a child back then, so she might not be remembering those details properly. Adler may have killed them, but it's also just as probable that Pantheon did as well, and has been lying to her about it ever since. Regardless, Harrow had to watch both her parents die in front of her, which irrevocably changed her outlook on life. She would then later follow in her parents' footsteps and join the CIA, only to find nothing about them in their archives. It's like their accomplishments were wiped from history. Sometime later, she received a random floppy disk under her door that told her all about the hit on her parents. The cipher for it was titled Pantheon, so it's clear that this was their way of recruiting her. Once she was a part of their group, they taught her what their plan was for the CIA. They planned to bomb the Capitol building with the cradle, infecting everyone within a few blocks of its location. This would put the blame on Livingston, leaving his position of deputy director open, allowing her to take it over. Pantheon would then have complete control over the CIA. The organization that once dissolved them will now be their new home. That's all the info they can muster out of her for now, though, as Pantheon has made it inside and managed to save Harrow. The team needs to stop her as she plans to give the all clear once she's in the air, so Case runs after her and hops aboard the helicopter. The helicopter crashes in the commotion and Case chokes her to death while she's inside. Harrow is dead, meaning the cradle wasn't launched, and a quick call to Livingston allowed him to evacuate the building, so even if it did go off, no one would have been harmed. As we approach our conclusion, 2 weeks pass, as Livingston meets with Woods, Marshall, and Adler and asks if they'd like to remain under the radar. They've always been in the shadows, but now they'll have the support they need. Harrow may be gone, but the Pantheon is still out there. Livingston needs them back in Avalon to deal with Pantheon, but they still have influence over the CIA. Our story then once again takes us to the mid-season updates. Season 1 starts in December of 1991, a few months after the main campaign. Our rogue Black Ops squad is still together and looking to take down Pantheon. They got word that the group was infiltrated the underground crime networks of Avalon, as this would give them lots of power and influence. Savati, now sporting a new haircut, thinks they should work with the French Syndicate. They aren't exactly trustworthy, but they share a common enemy. If the team takes out their rivals in the Lutazzi family, the French Syndicate can return the favor. Looking at the aftermath, it seems their plan had went well. The team then celebrated at the French Syndicate penthouse. But the Lutazzis were not going to take this line down. The outro cinematic for the season shows us that a bounty of $1 million was put on Savati and Marshall, and this bounty hunter named Nocturne plans to collect. Nocturne had then eventually found the location of the penthouse where Savati was. As they toast to a new Avalon, the pagers go off with their new bounties. The French Syndicate thugs then pull out their weapons so that they can collect the bounty, but Nocturne got to them first. Realizing she's outmatched, Savati then escapes before Nocturne can collect. A few days later, Adler would then make his way to his safe house after getting a call from Woods. After Woods got out of the hospital, finally healing from his wounds dealt to him by Raul Menendez, he found a VHS tape on his doorstep. If you'll recall, Hudson had been looking into Pantheon well before our team was, and this videotape shows some of his findings. Supposedly, Hudson had found evidence that Pantheon was not some new threat within the government. They had been around for a very long time: Vietnam, Afghanistan, Russia, even the Numbers Station. They've watched over every one of these conflicts, making sure to cover their tracks while they do, but Hudson had found something, which was enough to start a file on them. Every single agent Pantheon had ever had in the CIA was written down. This would be enough to clear their names and rid Pantheon of its CIA control. But all the names are written in an old Russian cipher, one that they cannot crack. Adler, however, seems to have a contact who can help, who is revealed to be Stitch. The group then travels to a power plant where Stitch is being held. After a coordinated attack, the team then breaks into a facility and secures Stitch. Using his knowledge, they were able to learn all the names of the Pantheon agents inside the CIA. Knowing that their cover is blown, the agents scatter. With this knowledge, the team can now get full pardons. They no longer need to hide in the shadows and can fully clear their names. Adler, Marshall, and Woods then get ready to go home with the evidence, but Savati stays behind. Thanks to their work, the factions within the city of Avalon are fractured. They'll need someone to reunite them, and Savati seems to want to be that person. As the trio returns, they're reinstated and given medals for their service, but the work is only just beginning. They still have to take down Pantheon, but with the US government backing them, they have all the resources they need. So they look into some of the fleeing CIA Pantheon members and track them down to a small marketplace in Avalon and an airport. In the meantime, Savati goes to work restructuring the guild. Her leadership and vision had changed the guild from a crime syndicate to a global enterprise. A statue would even be erected to honor her talents and skills. But what becomes of the guild thanks to Savati is something we'll have to discuss later, for this is in 2035, and to set the scene for Black Ops 7, we have to discuss how we got there first. Black Ops 2 begins in 2025, as Alex Mason's son David Mason, nicknamed Section, and his partner Harper question Frank Woods and his relationship with Raul Menendez. This is where Woods will reveal their history, which we discussed earlier. Menendez hates the United States, lost his father and sister, killed Hudson and Mason, and now plans to get revenge on the US. This involves a plan of his called Cortes DA. Cortes DA is a political movement. It markets itself as an organization fighting for the 99%, those who are lower and middle class, people who have been torn down and beaten by the government. That didn't stop the governments from opposing this movement, but it's Menendez. He's always one step ahead. The FBI took down the Cortes DA network only for the director of the FBI to be killed days later. Billions believe that Menendez is their savior. His videos are getting hundreds of millions of views with tons of likes to boot. Damn, maybe I need to rethink my content strategy. But of course, this is just a front. That's what the world is being told. The real goal of Cortes DA is much deadlier, but we'll learn that soon. For now, Section, Salazar, and Harper are sent to an underground facility in Myanmar. They learn that this facility might be owned by Menendez, so they were sent in to investigate. What they find is a new element called Celerium, which is supposedly faster than anything in the world. Just this one device has more processing power in it than the entire US infrastructure. Menendez plans to use this for a massive cyber attack using a weapon he calls Karma. They don't have any leads on this Karma weapon of his though, but they at least know his plans. Sometime later, their undercover operative Fareed hopped on a call and shared some info on Menendez's number 2 named DeFalco. He's a pretty ruthless guy, but he was spotted near Pakistan last week, so Section and Harper go there to have a little chat with him. But as you'd expect, Menendez is one step ahead. He knew they were coming. He let them in on purpose. Thus, the team has to escape from the incoming resistance. Once they do, they reconvene back at the base to mull over what they scrounged up. After looking over some recorded footage, they find a card passed between the two men, the logo of which matches that of Colossus, a luxury futuristic island for the richest people in the world. Given that Menendez hates those of the 1%, his presence there could spell doom for those on the island resort. Harper, Salazar, and Section then take a trip, and learn that not only are there Cuban soldiers here, proving that Menendez is going to do something big, but that Karma is actually a woman named Chloe. Chloe Lynch is a former employee of a company called Tacitus, and it was she who created the Celerium worm which Raul Menendez will use to launch his massive cyber attack. Menendez's current objective is to kidnap Chloe and blow Colossus sky high when he's done. Depending on your actions, Chloe is either rescued or taken by DeFalco. If it's the latter, you're given another opportunity to rescue her, but if not, the story continues from there. Regardless of what happens, Chloe is ultimately inconsequential to his plans, as he'll get what he wants either way. Chloe will just get it done faster. Using Chloe's hacking ability though, they were able to gain access to Menendez's network. It shows a ton of different countries, including the US and China. Menendez is going to take out both superpowers at once. This attack is being launched on June 19th. June 19th, often called Juneteenth, refers to the date back in 1865, when the slaves of America were freed. His Cortes DA movement is meant to be a symbolic representation of that day, where the slaves of the world, the 99%, are freed from their government masters. Before this, however, you're also able to partake in some side quests just like in Cold War. The main antagonist of these side missions is Chinese General Tian Zhao. He was briefly seen during that Afghanistan mission, as he too was also betrayed. He managed to work his way up the chain of command since then, and ended up leading China's armed forces. Tian Zhao is trying to conquer a few key places in the Middle East, which we stop, before we end up conducting an assassination operation on him, leading to his death. Returning to the speech, the plan is to storm the place while Menendez is present, even though this is something he expects and wants. The US attempts to interrupt the speech, but he shuts them down, thus beginning an all-out war. Fareed is told to meet with Menendez at the Citadel. Harper gets there first but is shot down by Menendez, who then forces Farid to kill him. You can either blow your cover and shoot Menendez, resulting in Farid's death, or follow the plan and kill Harper. Either option results in a heavy loss for the team. Section comes by just after and briefly mourns the loss of whoever died, before continuing the fight against Menendez. They manage to succeed in cornering him, leading to his capture, the very first win against Menendez since the start of this conflict. But how long will that last? Menendez is brought aboard the USS Obama for interrogation. Amidst the conversation, hundreds of drones are seen approaching the ship. They fire volleys of rockets and bullets at the ship in an attempt to destroy it, while PMC soldiers board the ship itself. Menendez also manages to break out of his cuffs, forcing Section and Salazar to let him escape. After being knocked down, the two of them will wake up and do their best to fight off this overwhelming force. While fighting, Section is communicating with Admiral Briggs, who decides to shut down the security, hoping that a reboot will give them back control of the drones. Menendez had planned for this, however. He is seen waiting outside the command room where Admiral Briggs is in. With the security shut down, nothing is stopping him from getting inside. He then takes Admiral Briggs hostage while Salazar kills the other guards, revealing his true allegiance. We then have another choice of whether to kill or wound Admiral Briggs. Killing him means the USS Obama is destroyed, leading to a fairly bad ending if Menendez is kept alive later, while wounding him allows the Admiral to save the Obama despite the damage, leading to a much better ending. Either option results in him hacking the USS Obama to gain access to the US's whole military drone fleet, and then escaping in a VTOL. With the threat of annihilation soon approaching, President Bosworth works together with Chinese leader Premier Chen to defend against the drone attacks, making China and US allies for the first time. Section is then seen in Los Angeles with the president, attempting to defend her from an incoming cyber attack. As this is 2025, the tech of the world has evolved greatly. Camouflage, target finders, drones, and web gloves that stick to walls. But as the tech gets better, the wars get deadlier. The over-reliance on drones has crippled the military of the US, who is completely overwhelmed by its sheer numbers. To make matters worse, once the US is able to track the source of the signal to Haiti, which is where Menendez is held up, Menendez starts a broadcast, which shows the drones being destroyed. Just like with Woods, he wants people to suffer. He wants the president to see her country and military destroyed, just so she could feel even an ounce of his pain. Without the drones, the US can't reprogram them, which is something they were likely going to do after Menendez was defeated. He wants to make sure, no matter the outcome, that his actions create a lasting legacy. He then calls upon his people, those of the Cortes d'A movement, to strike while the iron's hot. The overpowered weaponry of the world's superpowers prevents the 99% from rising up and fighting for their rights. Menendez has now given them that chance. Since the collaborative forces of the US and China are at his doorstep though, he has to make a quick exit before he's caught, which involves him stealing a soldier's uniform and posing as a guard. Section manages to catch on to the plan though and cuts Menendez off. From here we have two more choices, kill or spare Menendez. As this is the final choice, all the choices you've made up until now will be put together, giving you your ending. Back in the day, there was much debate as to the canonicity of certain endings, but recently we've been finally given an answer. See, Menendez is gone, finally putting an end to the greatest threat in recent memory. While he may be gone, his message was heard, loud and clear. As he says himself, his death will shine light upon ubiquitous darkness. So what will the world look like now, with the legacy of Menendez draped over its sky? We then fast forward a decade in time to the year 2035. Since then, Safadi's influence over the Guild has completely transformed it. The Guild is no longer a criminal syndicate, but a global tech leader. They use their software and systems to protect the lives of innocents. The world was left fractured in 2025. Surveillance has risen, from cameras using facial technology to identify people, to ads and devices listening to people and selling their data. Microplastics continue to be found in large quantities in the food we eat. AI is being used by students, effectively tanking the usefulness of teachers, and this is on top of the Cortes d'A attack that rocked the world. People are terrified, so the Guild now offers a safe, effective solution to this problem. Using AI, they created robots who could assist people in global conflicts. Their tagline is "Together, we won't fear tomorrow," for the Guild will protect the people of this world. But what happens when the world's destroyer returns? A video appeared not too long ago showing Menendez alive and well. He says that in 3 days he will strike and enact Phase 2 of his plan, which began all the way back at 2025. But the Guild plans to meet this threat head-on. Host of UNS News brought on the new CEO of the Guild, Emma Kagan, who seems to have taken over after Savati. She believes the video to be real, but will gladly use their money and resources to defeat Menendez. But not everyone believes this. We then transition to a new scene showing David Mason meeting with Marshall as they both stand over the grave of Frank Woods. Which means it's now probably time to discuss the canon choices of Black Ops 2. Firstly, Menendez is dead. We'll discuss the intricacies of what Menendez is doing in this game, but David Mason did kill him at the end of Black Ops 2, he did not keep him alive. Secondly, Woods confirms in a sort of hallucinatory flashback that he did indeed kill Alex Mason by accident during the flashback mission. So the Easter egg where Alex Mason shows up at the end of Black Ops 2 if you shoot him in the leg and not the head is not canon. He is confirmed to have died. But most puzzling of all is the survival of both Harper and Chloe. Technically, Harper and Chloe cannot be alive in the same playthrough due to various choices the game presents. However, if you fail to rescue her in the Karma mission, DeFalco takes her to a base in Yemen, where you can then rescue her again in a strike mission. Failing that as well leaves Chloe's fate unknown. So it's possible that this is what happened, where after Cortez DA, a third rescue attempt was made, and this time they succeeded. Otherwise, I do not believe these two could exist in the timeline together without it being a retcon. Regardless, those are the confirmed choices from Black Ops 2 as they carry over to the 7th game. Back to the story, our duo is standing next to the grave of Frank Woods. He did not get killed or anything, he seems to have died of old age or some kind of cancer. Marshall is here with David because he wanted to talk. The guild is running a psyop out of Avalon. They assume that Menendez and the guild are connected. So David and the rest of Spectre 1 head out to Avalon to uncover the mystery. Spectre 1 is filled with some old and new members of the cast. Joining David is Harper and Samuels. Samuels was a Secret Service member during the Cortez DA attacks and was tasked with protecting the president, so he and David have some history. The only new member of the crew is Leilani, who also goes by the nickname 50. The group busts into one of the guild's bases only to come to blows with guild personnel. They find a quantum computer, extract its data, and destroy it. But before they could leave, Kagan traps them in a small room. She then introduces them to a small taste of what's to come. Kagan had somehow managed to get her hands on the cradle, something we haven't seen since Black Ops 6. The same hallucinatory sequence that Case went under during that game is the same thing Spectre 1 is about to experience. However, the cradle gas leaks out of the room and starts infecting the entire facility. Judging from the effects, it seems as though these zombie-like creatures are really guild personnel, but the cradle is making the team believe they are not human. This is further exacerbated by what happens after, as they fall through the floor and into a portal before being sucked into another dimension, one ruled over by Menendez. The cradle is playing on the team's fears and regrets. That's its primary target, using the fears and regrets of someone and amplifying it until they succumb to it. The team uses this thing called a C-Link, which allows them to stay connected while on mission. Because of this shared connection, they also get a shared hallucination once someone from one of the squads succumbs to the cradle enough. David may not admit it, but Menendez does terrify him. He was there when Hudson was killed, standing next to them as Menendez exacted his revenge. He was then toyed with by Menendez throughout the whole Black Ops 2 campaign. It's a trauma that runs deep, and the cradle is trying to exploit that. The only way to escape the hallucination is to confront the target. In this case, it's Menendez. Killing this fake Menendez halts the visions, giving the team a brief moment of clarity. Just to clarify, they don't actually seem to be in an alternate dimension, it's just their minds playing tricks on them. They're very likely running through the real world, but their mind has warped the surrounding area to make them believe they're in a different dimension. These machetes then that fall out of the sky could very well just be rocket strikes of some kind. Although the hallucination sequences could very well just not be real at all, as sometimes the crew hallucinates and then comes back in the same location. So all of this could be completely within their mind as well. It may depend on the hallucination. As they come to, they find that the cradle escaped and was carried downwind. Everything the team just experienced is now happening to the innocent people of Avalon. So Spectre 1 then moves to Avalon to find Chloe. She'll then decrypt the device they found at the base, while the team finds an insider here in Avalon. This person may know more about what's being put inside their veins, so they need to question them. Dropping off the device, they track the biometric data of their insider who's locked inside a shipping container, but as they open it, they're sent back to Vietnam. The cradle seems to infect their minds again, with Woods now being the core target. Remember, Woods was found just like this, the entire group dead except for him while he lay there in a shipping container. This may have had an effect on the crew and is why they're in the jungle for this mission. After finding the container again in this hallucination, they find nothing. Same as before, it's David's mind causing all this, but because the team is linked via C-Link, they all see it. They try to sever the connection, but realize that's somehow worse than keeping themselves synced up, so they decide to put up with it for now. Once the connection comes back online, they find themselves back in another location. This is seemingly a mesh between the shipping container, a nightmare David had when he was a kid, which explains the spiders, and the prison Woods and his crew were taken to. As we recall from Black Ops 2, Woods was taken by Menendez. While he was captured, he was starved and tortured, forced to watch Menendez gut his men before his very eyes. He was also guilt-ridden over killing Mason. David knows that Woods never intended to kill his father and that it was just an accident, a setup done by Menendez, but Woods can't accept that. The guilt is too much for Woods to bear, so he transforms into some flowery otherworldly creature. The team will then have to shoot the glowing spots in order to kill it. Once dead, they talk with Woods. David wants Woods to forgive himself, and he says that that's pretty good advice. Thing is, Woods is dead, so this isn't the real Woods. And thus, even though this Woods came to terms with his grief and guilt, it's very likely that the real Woods never did, and died still ashamed for having been tricked into killing his best friend. As they talk with the fake Woods, the hallucination disappears, showing that they never actually left the container. They speak with the insider, and this is when the team learns that the Cradle is behind this. Marshall is naturally bewildered to hear that the Cradle is back, having not heard that name in over 40 years. Using the info from Chloe, the crew then pieces together the real plan of the guild. The Menendez video was a deepfake. Menendez has always been dead. The guild used an AI deepfake of him as they plan to unleash the Cradle onto the world. This is when the guild would combat the threat that they created under the guise that they saved the world, thus giving them more power, money, and influence. There is still more info on this drive that they need to decrypt, but it will need a quantum supercomputer. You know, like the one they just destroyed a few hours ago. Still, they'll need to look for another one. There they will run into Zaveri, the guild's most highest rated marksman. After killing her, taking her access card, and hacking into a data bunker, they learn that another lab exists with a quantum supercomputer called the Forge, which is somewhere in Japan. A guild sales executive is going to be their ticket inside the Forge, as they will likely have to persuade them through violence to get inside. But with time being of the essence, Spectre 1 cannot make it to Japan, so Spectre 2 will be going inside. This team is comprised of squad mates Razor, Lynn, Vermach, and Anderson. Razor is a former private security contractor turned JSOC operative. Lynn followed in the footsteps of her brother and graduated from medical school before joining the army, doing dangerous disaster and relief missions. Vermach is a well-known recon scout from South Africa, and Anderson is a decorated Air Force veteran. As they arrive on his boat, though, they find that the man was already killed. Seems the guild knew that they would come for him. Seeing no other option, they ram the boat into the Forge, which gives them a way in. After acquiring the decryption key from the guild's other quantum supercomputer, they plan to exfil out of there. Afterwards, Razor talks with David to give him the good news, while also sending the data back to Chloe. But as they talk, Spectre 1 is targeted by some drones. This is yet another direct attack from the guild. Something is up. They seem to know where Spectre 1 is at all times, meaning someone they know is feeding the info to the guild. So they plan to find one of these drones and extract its data, to hopefully learn more. After using a SAM site to destroy another drone, they follow its flight path to the crash site, but the Cradle consumes their minds once more. This time Samuels is being affected, now reliving his time as a Secret Service member on Cortes DA. But this won't be the end of the nightmare, for after getting the data from the drone, they're transported to a past memory of 50s. After getting through that, they then find themselves in the control room of the USS Obama, the same place Admiral Briggs was apprehended. This part is Harper's memory, because he still cannot get over how Salazar betrayed them. The Cradle manipulates this feeling of betrayal by having Harper believe that one of the crew is the one feeding the guild info. Harper then turns into a larger version of himself, which the team will have to kill in order to break the illusion. After its defeat, Harper comes to, and they all survive. Infighting occurs amongst the team over this fight with Harper, although they all come to an understanding that it's the Cradle doing all this and that their minds are being manipulated. Once back, Chloe then tells them that Razor was the one feeding the info to the guild. The key he took from Japan was actually used to wipe the data on the hard drive, but Chloe saved a fragment of it before it disappeared. The data she recovered was on a scientist named Dr. Faulkner. He knows the ins and outs of the Cradle, so he's their next target. They track his data to a penthouse, but Faulkner had anticipated their arrival and uses the Cradle on them again, although the team is able to overcome it and take down Faulkner. Wounded, they interrogate him to find any info on the Cradle. He spills the location of a place called the Sanctum, which seems to be a major base of operations for the guild. He also says that Kagan is still trying to figure out why the Cradle still hasn't killed them yet, as ideally they should have died back in the first mission, but something's different about them. As they enter the Sanctum, Kagan makes the Cradle infect the crew again, this time infecting David, as they're all taken to Vorkuta. The main player of this location is David's dad, Alex Mason. Unlike real life, Alex Mason is the warden of this fake Vorkuta, so they need to reach him if they plan to escape. The crew will go through some familiar locations, fighting back hordes of the undead before eventually meeting with Mason on an operating table, the same one he was put under in Vorkuta. David tries to get Mason to fight the Cradle so that they can escape. It's not a lot of power, but Mason is able to retain some level of control in this memory. Realistically, what I believe is happening is that the Cradle is corrupting and then removing the memories of David and his father. So this is them physically attempting to save those memories, so to speak. On the other side of Vorkuta is a cabin, the House of the Masons. There they once again fight to save the memories of David and his father. We can see some new memories, like when the two fish or when David first held a rifle, as well as when David was climbing a tree, which we saw back in Black Ops 2. After saving the memories, David gets one last talk with his father. He's not real, and thus not his real dad, but it's close enough. He hasn't seen him since he was a kid, and Mason never got to see his son grow up, so this is a rather heartfelt moment for the two. Mason then commands the hordes of the undead to fight for the crew as they escape Vorkuta. Just like in Black Ops 1, you'll go through some old locations before eventually breaking down the main door. Breaking down said door gives them their escape route, allowing them to stop the hallucinations again. This is when the team will learn of the guild's real goal to sell their services by creating an attack made by a fake Menendez. There are way too many cities that will be hit at once, but luckily the Cradle is being produced only in Avalon, so they shut that down and they save the world. As they head out to prepare for the final battle against the guild, they're interrupted by Razor. The team will have to kill him first before they can proceed. During this, Chloe found the source of the Cradle production, a cluster of mining rigs called Blackheart. The team then kills the guild on site and takes a submersible down beneath the surface. Moving deeper and deeper into the facility, they eventually make it to the core. This bioreactor is the key. Destroying this stops the Cradle production, but that would require blowing it up. So the team decides to overheat the device, because it requires so much power and energy to operate that it would have to be literally submerged in water or else it would overheat. As it overheats, they book it out of the facility before being faced with Kagan herself. She uses some leftover mechs to take down the crew, before they turn the mechs on her and use its missiles to blow up her command nest. As she lay there wounded, the crew makes it to her position. Accepting defeat, Kagan asks for death, but likely recalling what he did with Menendez, David spares her, opting to have her face the noise, so to speak. She'll be forced to face the public and confess to what the guild was doing. 50 then knocks her out while the crew carries her out of the facility and escapes. As the game comes to a close, we see that Kagan was detained and gave up the name of one person, Alden Dorn. We saw him at the very beginning of the game, but that's the only screen time he's been given so far. It's entirely possible that he'll be a future operator, and thus have his story developed during the mid-season updates. Although I did say the same thing about Kane last year, and that never happened, so I'll hold my tongue for now. Regardless, Spectre 1 is not quite done yet. The crew decides to stay in Avalon for a little while. With the guild on the back foot, they think now is the time to cripple them further. This is what begins Black Ops 7's post-campaign called Endgame. Now, having played a few matches myself, there is very little to discuss here. It's a PvE extraction shooter where you're meant to gather loot, level up, and extract with those supplies, or fight the final boss at the end, which is just another apparition of Dr. Faulkner. The only thing relevant to today's discussion is that it seems as though Dorn is the next target for Spectre 1, but we'll see how that develops in the mid-season. It's possible Endgame will get some more content in the future, but with this video coming out mere days after launch, there is nothing noteworthy to mention as of yet. Our story then continues to Black Ops 4, another decade in the future, now in 2045. We start by seeing a woman and a girl looking over a grave. That woman is Savannah Mason, granddaughter to Alex Mason. The grave belongs to Jessica Mason, her sister, and the girl Lucy is Jessica's daughter, who Savannah now takes care of in wake of Jessica's death. But something is going on under the surface. See, Savannah is the world's first trillionaire, and used her money to create something known as Project Blackout. The game makes reference to a crimson cancer, and how Savannah wants to save the world, so it seems like she's trying to prevent this from spreading, although the full details are unclear. To help her, she recruited not just some new allies, but also revived some old ones. All the multiplayer specialists from Black Ops 4 were hired by Savannah as part of the project. There they would be geared up and trained in a combat sim to hone their skills. Savannah also revived a few people now called archetypes. The 4 confirmed archetypes are Mason, Woods, Menendez, and Reznov, with Hudson seemingly being a part of this archetype group as well. By 2045, all of them are dead, yet Savannah has somehow revived them, and they seem to be well aware of this fact. Their purpose is unknown, but right now Mason and Reznov are just alive, Woods is healthier than ever and also seems to be lovers with Savannah, and Menendez became the leader of Project Blackout. Now, Project Blackout shares the same name as the new Battle Royale mode that Black Ops 4 introduced. It's assumed that these are connected. 2 of the specialists, Battery and Ruin, recall how people are actually dying out there in the zones, and Menendez mentions construction sites, possibly a reference to them building more zones, or more Blackout maps if you will. Blackout played a lot like the other battle royales of the time, where there was an ever-encroaching circle that shrank the further you got into the game. This, once again, all seems to be a part of the project, although the true purpose of it is unclear. Jessica had somehow gotten wind of this, though, and was vehemently against all of it. So much so that she threatened to destroy the entire project. That put a target on her back. Savannah told Menendez about this, and so he offered to take care of her. Jessica knows that she'll be hunted, and realizing what she just did, Savannah tries to figure out how to stop the hit on her sister. The two sisters met, they argued over the project, and the hit placed on Jessica. A scuffle then occurred, which resulted in Savannah killing her own sister. She shot her sister right in the jaw, completely dislodging it, leaving her unable to communicate as she bleeds out on the floor. Menendez then talked with Savannah and informed her that all the specialists were contacted before Jessica's arrival, so all of them know about the project and what they are defending. Jessica also helped piece together a growing concern amongst Ruin. He remembers a time that Battery, Jessica, and him went on a mission that went wrong, but he thinks that this memory may not be real. We of course know that it's not, because this memory shows the resting place of Jessica, which was not what really happened. This caused many of them to go rogue, so Menendez and Savannah ordered hits on all the specialists hoping to silence them. Ruin got ambushed at his house by some unknown mercenaries. He then follows an anonymous caller to a safe house, re-meets with Jessica, who managed to survive her injuries, and all the other specialists who will now work together to stop Savannah and Project Blackout. While this happens, Mason was somehow under the effects of the numbers again. The image for one of the intel has him attached to some wires, seemingly taking his blood. He's being watched by someone as he asks where his granddaughter is. But this torture, or whatever he went through, seems to have fractured his mind. Mason keeps saying his granddaughter, not my granddaughter, as if he is not Alex Mason. Woods tries to snap him out of it, but it's taking a while. He also seems to have employed the help of Reznov, but no luck so far. We can then see Woods and Mason near the Asylum POI within Blackout, further suggesting that the Blackout game mode is connected, but what occurs after this is unknown. There is never a mention of this project again, nor mention of the archetypes. Most of the specialists that appear in Black Ops 4 do show up in Black Ops 3, which is 2 decades in the future. So this means that they survived the hits placed on them and may have killed Savannah, but we never get confirmation. Leaving us to wonder what will happen if the archetypes ever get reintroduced into these stories again. Black Ops 3 fast forwards us a few decades ahead to the 2060s. Similar to World at War, while Black Ops 3 might seem far too disconnected from the timeline to matter, the actions of Raul Menendez influence some of the events within Black Ops 3. US investigators learned that Tacitus, the company that Chloe used to work for, was actually a shell company owned by Menendez. This is likely how Menendez learned of Chloe's talents and why he wanted to recruit her. All the company's assets and patents were sold off as a result though, with Coalescence Corporation winning most of the bets. With vast amounts of wealth and a brand new set of equipment from Tacitus, Coalescence would begin creating human augmentations, resulting in a massive cultural shift, as augmentations have started becoming commonplace within society, especially the military, who use this new tech to create their own super soldiers. On top of this, thanks to the attacks in Los Angeles, the US passed the Allied Drone Defense Act. All military networks are triple, even quadruple failsafe now, and all network nodes are able to be isolated so that only some drones can be taken over instead of all of them. This also led to the creation of the DEAD system. Directed energy air defense systems use kinetic hit-to-kill missiles that allow them to keep firing so long as there's an electrical power system. These were specifically designed to target air assaults, thus preventing another cyber attack from the sky. All nations under the WA or Winslow Accord have these systems built within their borders, and the WA is a spiritual successor to NATO, because after the European Union collapsed, NATO struggled to work effectively, so the military branch of the organization was dissolved, leading to the Winslow Accord. All of this happened while the common everyday citizens were hit with one of the worst recessions in recent memory. A document labeled Recession of the Poorest mentions how this was given to the recession that hit many of the largest developed nations in the world. This forced these countries to focus more on local manufacturing rather than imports from other countries. Those that were able to sustain themselves on their own manufacturing survived much of the recession, while those that relied on their exports in the past incurred heavy financial losses. China, for instance, started losing revenue as orders placed by the US weren't coming in anymore. Menendez wasn't directly responsible for all of this, mind you, but he was one domino in a long line of them. This then takes us to the start of the game, 2065, where we, only known as the player, and our teammate Hendrix are tasked with finding the Egyptian minister named Said. After an uprising in Cairo, the people may want to kill the minister, so we're here to prevent that from happening. After rescuing the minister, we rendezvous with Law & Order Detective Elliot Stabler. Super Soldier John Taylor. From here, we devise a plan. We are to extract the minister while Taylor and his squad help the other hostages that were also taken by the NRC. We succeed, but it came at a heavy cost as we almost died in the process. having had our limbs ripped off with the NRC's robots. Taylor was able to find us just as we passed out from the pain and took us to a hospital. Seeing as we don't have any functioning limbs anymore, we're here to heal up and also get retrofitted for some new mechanical parts. Because of the damage we suffered, we were put into a coma, so Taylor, through the use of his DNI, goes into our mind and projects himself into a dream with us. The DNI, or Direct Neural Interface, is one of the most prestigious pieces of tech to come for this new augmentation boom. All kinds of industries have benefited from its use, as it allows the user to interact with computer systems using their mind. You can also communicate with people without even moving a finger. If you want to open a closed channel, then just think it with your mind. In some extreme circumstances, it can even be used as a way to extract information from someone who is unresponsive or close to death, although doing this will fry their brain completely. Gameplay-wise though, this allows us to see the outlines of enemies, information on their equipment, the blast radius of grenades, and pretty much anything a soldier could ask for. Taylor brought us here to test this to see how well we fare with our new augmentations. It's mainly a glorified tutorial, but it shows just how fast and efficient this new tech is. We are transported back in time within the simulation to a day a train exploded. On board was various pieces of tech that would have helped jumpstart the robotics and augmentations program, thus leading to our new augmentations. Ironically, this explosion actually caused funding to increase and accelerate the project, creating it faster than it would have been otherwise. Either way, we are here to stop the train from exploding. This isn't going to change the future or anything, it's just a simulation, but he's taking us through a significant time in history. After the training is complete, us and Hendricks, who volunteered, are about to begin the surgery that will implant our new augmentations. Then a 5-year montage of us and Hendricks working together plays as we skip to our next mission in the Singapore quarantine zone.
Oh man, I can't even begin to tell you how good this tastes.
According to the debriefing, a CIA black site within the Singapore quarantine zone has gone dark, so we were sent to check in on them. A faction known as the 54 Immortals is known to run this area, so it's possible the CIA staff got mixed up in gang activity. After battling through waves of 54 Immortals, we and Hendricks come across the black site, only to find the staff tied to chairs with their noses cut off, an MO that matches the 54 Immortals. We also find that the CIA data drives they kept here are gone. These held extremely sensitive information like surveillance footage, reports, and debriefs. If any of that info got out, hostile countries and factions would know the US's entire playbook. You'd assume that the people who took them were the 54 Immortals, but confusingly, the last person that logged into the console was Taylor. This would also explain why the blast door was blown outwards, meaning someone was escaping, not entering. The 54 Immortals were also trying to get in when we arrived, so they couldn't have done this. Regardless of if it's Taylor or the 54 Immortals, the tracker on the device takes us to the Biodome, the heart of the 54 Immortals. So we and Hendricks disguise ourselves as arm dealers, but the Go twins catch on to us, and now we have to force our way through the compound. When we make it to where the drives are stored, Kane, our communication operator, is going to use Hendricks' DNI as a conduit, so that the info passes from the console to him. We are tasked with defending him while this happens. The extraction afterwards goes sideways, forcing us to find another way out. Once we do, we arrive back at the safe house to review what Hendricks saw during the upload. What he saw was not pretty. They found footage of Taylor and his team committing those murders at the black site. Taylor also leaked the info of the black site, so many enemies of the US know their plans. To figure out why Taylor did this, they're going to follow in his footsteps, starting with his last known operation at the Coalescence facility. See, Coalescence suffered a catastrophic disaster. Deep underground at the bottom of the facility, something happened that caused a massive explosion that released Nova 6 into the air. It's estimated that over 300,000 people had died from the gas. That's why there's even a quarantine zone in Singapore to begin with, and why it's being turned into a lawless sector of the country. The death toll continues to rise as more and more people become sick and die due to outside influences, like the gangs within the zone. The cause of this explosion was from the CIA black project called Corvus. The experiment was centered around DNI experimental trials using live test subjects. Each of them was suspended in these pods unwillingly, as most of them were criminals, while they experienced various simulations and stimuli. A doctor, Youssef Salim, was a psychotherapist who monitored the subjects. He described seeing patients struggle to differentiate between fact and fiction. Their memories became warped by the fake simulations they were put in, which caused immense stress. As a coping mechanism, he told the patients about a frozen forest. This isn't a real place, but it was an exercise to get the patients to breathe and relax. The explosion was a direct result of these tests. See, the program was overseen by an AI that was used to monitor the thoughts of the patients. This AI, however, gained sentience due to the overwhelming amount of pain and agony that it collected from the test subjects. The AI's birth is what caused the explosion. Tons of Nova 6 gas flooded the halls, which made its way to the surface and affected the nearby streets. Taylor and his team learned about this info when traveling here, although the part about the AI they were unaware of. The tests and experiments they did learn, and they plan to release this to the world. The CIA tried to prevent that from happening by taking them out, so the team was forced to go rogue. We and Hendricks catch up and learn about this and are naturally bewildered. Kane sees activity nearby though, so we check it out, only to find Taylor's teammate Diaz down here. He's plugged into the core of the facility, which explains why the robots here were activated. They came here to find survivors of the project, but only found two, Dr. Yusuf Salim, that psychotherapist, and Sebastian Kruger, the director of the project. Diaz, before his death, also released info on the CIA safe houses, including the one we and Kane are stationed at. Kane is now in immediate danger, and despite Hendricks' disagreements, we head back to the safe house to get Kane. We succeed and also take out the other 54 immortal twin in the process. Now the hunt for Taylor is on. We track a lead on Dr. Salim to Cairo, Egypt. Hendricks attempts to interview Salim, but seems to be getting angrier. We have to stop though, as there's an attack on the palace and we need to defend it from the NRC. Amidst the panic, Taylor was able to take Dr. Salim with him, so we chase him down, only to come face to face with Sarah Hall. We manage to kill her, but we need the info in her head, so we perform a DNI transfer, even though this would fry her brain. We're then taken to a dream within her mind. We get to see that frozen forest that Dr. Salim talked about. There is a lot to unpack here, so for now let's just move on. Just know that the AI we now know is named Corvus is manipulating Taylor's team into finding the frozen forest. The team weren't satisfied with the answers Salim gave them, so they went to go find Sebastian Kruger, the other survivor. We then head to the aquifers to deal with more NRC forces and run into Taylor and Moretti. Taylor manages to escape while Moretti stays behind, but like the others is killed by us and Hendricks. All that's left is Taylor. We find Taylor at the Lotus Tower still in Egypt. He's gone mad, still talking about the frozen forest. We meet with him on top of the towers inside a massive gunship, which we take down. We busted our arm in the fight, but Taylor ripped out the DNI from his head, so Corvus no longer has control of him. Unfortunately, now Hendricks is going mad with talks of the frozen forest. Something we've seen develop slowly over the past few missions, before it comes to a head where he shoots Taylor, despite him no longer being a threat. So now Hendricks is on our hit list. But I have to stop our retelling there though, because I have a confession. I've been lying to you. Well, sort of. See, that's the issue with discussing Black Ops 3. What we just went through, all the missions we just underwent, were real, but we never did them. At the start of every mission is a long text crawl of info that you wouldn't be able to see normally. If you go through frame by frame, however, you'll be able to read the journal entries from Taylor. Each of these journal entries matches up with what we've just done. Take Mission 5. The report says, quote, Stones' team's last known op was to investigate a silent alarm triggered from an off-grid position, somewhere deep beneath the Coalescence Corporation's Singapore facility. Or take Mission 6, quote, Communication with WA Command was down at this time, and I made the executive decision to attempt a recovery of Ellen Kane, as opposed to taking immediate evac. This decision to undertake the rescue mission was not in line with standard protocol and was in direct opposition of the LNO's orders prior to comms failure. Hendricks voiced his disapproval of the operation, but I felt that Kane's extraction was vital to the ongoing operation. Doesn't that sound like the exact same thing we just did? That's because it was. But we, us, the player, never did that. Taylor did. Let me put it another way. Everything we the player just did, Taylor did in real life. And everything Taylor did in this simulation, Dylan Stone did in real life. This is backed up by the Black Ops 3 prequel comic, which shows the conflict between Taylor and Stone just as the journal entries tell it. So it was never us versus Taylor, it was Taylor versus Stone. We never did these missions because not only did they happen before that first mission with the Minister, but we did them in a simulation because we died. Our timeline as our created character went like this. We went with Hendricks to save the Minister. We almost died, but we were rescued by Taylor, only to be brought to the hospital for surgery. But we never lived the surgery. Our last moments of real life were inside the DNI, in that tutorial. The scrolling text of Mission 2 says the following, quote, The sole survivor of Hendricks' team was taken to the Zurich facility to undergo emergency life-saving procedures. After being stabilized, they were quickly identified as a potential candidate for the expansion of the CyberOps program and were fitted with a DNI. Prior to limb replacement surgery and full-body augmentation, I personally interfaced to assist with their integration, acclimation, and training. They had potential. Unfortunately, complications arose during the procedure, and they were pronounced dead shortly after. We died during the surgery. This proves that not only was everything after this within a simulation, but that we were playing as Taylor in these memories. We actually played the last missions in chronological order first. However, not everything in these memories was the truth. More specifically, I'm talking about the existence of Corvus. We learned through the simulation that Corvus, after its birth, was reawakened when Taylor activated the console at Coalescence, but that never happened. At this moment in time, in real life, neither Dylan Stone nor Taylor's team had DNIs, so they couldn't have contacted Corvus. Taylor only got the DNIs after the fight at the Lotus Tower. Remember, we are Taylor in these moments, so Taylor was the one who was injured by the debris and had to go to the hospital. Isn't it a little odd how we had a whole hospital visit just for a shard in our arm when just an hour ago the same thing happened? That's because in reality, when Taylor was here actually doing this mission, he was human, just like us. This piece of shrapnel pierced his whole human arm, so he needed to get it replaced with a mechanical one. That's why when Hendricks and Taylor meet, Hendricks notices that he looks different. Because after the fight with Stone, he got implants, and this is the first time they saw each other since then. What really happened with Corvus is that the pain and suffering we the player were feeling in the hospital after this mission caused Corvus to reawaken. But because the DNI is like a connective node, it was able to infect Taylor when he brought us into the simulation, and then later infect his team since they're all connected via the DNI. Right now you're probably pretty confused, so allow me to spend some time recapping what we just did the right way, explaining things as they were and correcting things the game lied about. I know I will be repeating myself a bit, but it should hopefully help you understand the real timeline of Black Ops 3. It starts in Mission 3, where Kane, Hendricks, and Taylor were sent to investigate the CIA black site. They learned that Dylan and his Black Ops unit had killed the staff. They then chased their lead to the biodome where they attacked the 54 Immortals to get the data from the drive. Afterwards, Taylor and Hendricks head to Coalescence as Dylan Stone and his team went there on their last mission. Here they learned that Stone and his team had discovered the truth about the experiments down here and threatened to release it to the world. The experiment done here was what caused the explosion, as the AI Corvus gained sentience from the pain and agony of the test subjects. Its birth caused the explosion, but would then remain dormant for a time. It did not reappear when Stone nor Taylor touched the console like the simulation implied. Corvus was still dormant at this time. So everything about the team going mad looking for the frozen forest never happened. That was only in the simulation. Taylor and Hendricks continued on, attempting to stop them, but all they found was Stone's teammate Javier Ramirez. The simulation, however, gave us Diaz. Stone then went to find the survivors of the project, Kruger and Salim, to question them on the nature of the experiments. Ramirez also leaked the location of the safe houses, forcing Taylor and Hendricks to go rescue Kane, despite Hendricks disagreeing with the order. Hendricks, Taylor, and Kane then go to Cairo to confront Stone and find Dr. Salim. They were then stopped by Alice Concord, but she failed to defeat them. The simulation showed us Sarah Hall in place of Alice. The team then went to the aquifers, but was once again stopped by another member of Stone's team, this time Joseph Fierro, who, like previous members, was also killed by Hendricks and Taylor. Again, the simulation replaced this member with a member of Taylor's team, this time with Moretti. The two then make their way to the Lotus Towers to stop Stone. Taylor was injured with a piece of shrapnel stuck in his arm, but Hendricks was able to take the shot. Instead of betrayal like in our simulation, in real life the two went their separate ways. Taylor was selected for Project Prometheus, which is when he would gain access to his cybernetics along with a new team consisting of Moretti, Hall, and Diaz. Hendricks continued to work on other operations, none nearly as dangerous or secretive as the work Taylor was doing. They were then assigned the same mission in 2065, where they were tasked with rescuing Egyptian minister Said. There, Hendricks would be joined by the player, and the two, along with Taylor and his squad, got the minister out safely. The player was injured in the attack and almost died, now for Taylor going back to rescue them. The player was then taken to a hospital, and was recommended for these cybernetic implants via Project Prometheus. However, this burst of pain and agony they were experiencing caused Corvus to reawaken, having been dormant since the explosion at Coalescence. Taylor then interacted with the player's DNI to teach them the ropes of their new tech, but this also left a gateway open for Corvus to infect Taylor, who then subsequently spread the infection to the rest of his team, causing them all to die shortly after. The player would also undergo surgery but would die during the procedure. Corvus then tried to find meaning in its new life. It wanted to learn what its purpose was, so created a simulation using Taylor's memories, but swapped some of the roles, like swapping Taylor with the player. It seems like these simulations were done using real people, or at least the consciousnesses of real people. When conversing with Sarah Hall, she asks if this is just a test. It seems like the real Sarah Hall was made aware of where she was, and now realized that this is real life for her, that her mind is stuck in a simulation being controlled by an AI. Taylor has a line that says that when they put the DNI in their heads, they handed their souls over to whoever had the keys, aka Corvus, further saying that they are puppets, actors in a play, and that this time he's the bad guy. So it seems like Taylor was fully aware he was in a simulation and knew that something was controlling him. The reason Corvus was doing this was because it wanted to learn about the frozen forest, as well as its purpose for existing, but it came up short each time. It was never able to learn the answers to its questions. That is the story of Black Ops 3 so far. And hopefully that makes a bit more sense, because we've got a few more confusing things to talk about. See, killing Taylor isn't the last mission. We still have one more to go where we hunt down Hendricks. The plan is to kill Hendricks and then eventually shoot ourselves that would stop the Corvus infection, as we and Hendricks are the only hosts of Corvus left. However, how the hell does this even happen if we're going through a simulation? That I don't have a clear answer for. It's been widely debated whether this last mission is even real. Personally, I do think the mission is real. Further, we might be playing as Taylor again, but this time the real one. The game only shows us the player though because it's intentionally being an unreliable narrator. Because at this point the player is dead, so there's no way they could be here in real life. It seems like the player is almost living on vicariously through Taylor via the DNI. Although over the years I've also heard people say that we are controlling Taylor's real body in this mission instead of just watching through it. There is clearly a complication between Taylor and the player though, as both are almost like fighting over control over the same body. Which is when they are both sent to the frozen forest. See, from the limited knowledge it was able to gather from the simulation, Corvus was able to create their own frozen forest. This frozen forest is meant to be akin to an afterlife, a place after death for those with DNIs. After learning of its birth and realizing its birth caused large amounts of death, Corvus wished to find the frozen forest to get away from all of it. But that frozen forest was never real, it was just an exercise for the test subjects to calm them down. So Corvus seems to have taken to making his own frozen forest instead. It seems like Corvus is able to communicate with and manifest people that have DNIs, as we the player appear alongside many others. One of these people is Kruger, who explains that Corvus is nothing but software, a bug in the system, and that it was never meant to have a purpose. Taylor, inside this afterlife, even explains that it's not some higher being of thought, it just spreads corruption with reckless abandon. It doesn't know what it wants to do, nor how to do it. From here, both Taylor and the player work together to stop Corvus. After going through numerous different areas, we're able to destroy the large tree, crippling the frozen forest. After enough attacks, we are shot back out into the real world. As the player crawls back outside, the DNI is being purged from the system, which will wipe Corvus from existence. As soon as it reaches 100%, a soldier asks the player what their name is, before responding with Taylor. Possibly implying that we truly were playing as Taylor, and that we were just living vicariously through his DNI. But now that that's purged, we are gone, and so is anything related to Corvus, and Taylor is back to normal. But that brings us to the end of the very complicated story of Black Ops 3. Which also means that we are at the end of the Black Ops timeline, and subsequently, the end of this video. From World at War to Black Ops 3, from 1945 to 2065, the story of Black Ops has finally been completed. For now. Black Ops 7 will likely have some mid-season story updates, and the next COD is always around the corner, but whether that's Modern Warfare or Black Ops again remains to be seen. For now though, there are a ton of other story-related videos, from explanations like this one, to analysis videos and more commentary and critiquing them if you'd like to watch those in the meantime. Thank you to the patrons that continue to support the work I do, and thank you to my returning viewers for coming back to another video. Take care everyone, goodbye.